Hello, my name is Josue Rivera, and I'm 78 years young and married to a beautiful woman called Damaris. And the Lord blessed us with four wonderful kids: Rebecca, Giselle, Josue Daniel, and Diana Elise. My father was born in 1918, and he was not a Christian then, but in 1935, at the age of 17 in Puerto Rico, he accepted the Lord. And then after that, he worked. He was a hard worker. And after that, he went into the army and he participated in World War II. In 1942, in church, my mother was already a Christian. In church, he met my mother, Primitiva Rivera Vasquez. They got married in 1942, May of 1942. And then the first child was stillborn. It was my sister. And then in 1944, March 3rd, I came to the world. And I owe my life twice to my father because my mother was having birth pains. My father called his friends. They came over with the car. They took him to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, my mother gives birth in the car. There's a lot of tools on the back seat of the car. My father caught me in the air as soon as we got to the hospital. And then they bring him to the emergency. The nurse says, she already gave birth. Why did you bring him? What did you come in here for? My father says, so you could cut the umbilical cord. So I owe my life to my father twice. A hard-working man. I thank God for my father every day. He was hardworking. He was a man that loved his family. He was a man that cared for his family. He was a man that was a Christian. They were both Christian. They had that in common. They were both Christian, so it was a Christian home. I was raised in a Christian home. When I was 9 years young, my father in 1952 decided to come to the United States, downtown Manhattan, 65 East 4th Street. And then in 1953, my father sent for the family, which is my mother, my brother, my younger brother, and my younger sister. And we all came to the United States. It was a shocking experience because we used to live out in the suburbs, camp like country type. When we came here, there was a lot of bricks and a lot of buildings. We didn't have that. So it was like a shocking experience to me. But my father, he already had a job. He found a job. My mother also went and found a job. They both worked. And while they worked, we went to school. And then, since it was a Christian family, we went to a Church of All Nations. After school, it was a place where they took care of us. And as the time went on, my father would, like I said, he was a hard worker. He loved his family. He loved his kids. He was my hero. My father was my hero. He taught me so much. Every time there was like, he would buy the newspaper and there was like bad news, he would read the newspaper with me and told me, look, this is what happened. Because at that time, there was a lot of gangs back there in the 60s and in the 50s. In the 60s and the 70s, there was a lot of gangs. So my father would actually sit down with me and tell me, listen, this is what happens. And he was a very handy. And every time people would call him to do some certain jobs, he would take me along. And he would teach me how to do certain things, small carpentry, painting, plumbing. He would do it and he would help me. So I learned so much from my father. And the only thing with my father was that every time we went visit him, he would like kiss my mother, kiss my sister, but he would never kiss me or my brother. I don't know if that was a man thing. But anyway, when I was older, I went to him and I said, I'm going to change this. I went there, I hugged him, and I kissed him. And he started to get the idea, and he started to kiss me too at that time. I don't know why. I don't know. Latin men, I guess they don't want to kiss. He won't kiss my brother, and he won't kiss me either. So that I changed, and I thank God. And my father always was there for the family. He was a hard worker. He would work, come home. My mother would have dinner ready, and we go to church. And it was a church like every day of the week out there when we were in Manhattan. And my father was there. He would love us. He would play with us. He would take us on trips sometimes, because he used to work 5 days a week, but sometimes he used to work 6. But on his days off, when he had a day off, he would take us on trips. He would take us to the museum. He would take us to the ball game, and sometimes he would take us to the theater, something that was a no for a Pentecostal time. Well, my father would do that. He was a little liberal, and I thank God for him every day. And then my mother, of course, she was also there. She was a great parent along with my father. And as far as growing up, I wanted to be just like my father. He was my hero. My father could do nothing wrong. Of course, he was not perfect. None of us are. But he was like my hero, my father. And we had such a wonderful childhood in Puerto Rico and here in New York, as we used to live on downtown Manhattan. And then it was a great life. It was a great life. And then as I was growing up, I wanted to be just like my father. He would always tell me, one time he said to me, listen, I'm going to give you something that no one could give you. And I said, what's that? Something that I don't want you to put through the dirt. Something that I want you to never be ashamed of. And that's your last name, Rivera. Don't put it through the dirt. That stayed with me. And while I was growing up and I got married to my wife, Damaris, always stay with me. And that's the same thing I tell my kids. And for the young fathers here today, my advice to them is, pray with your kids. Yes, pray with your kids. Read to your kids, study the Bible, but also play with them, play with the kids. Also, another thing that I always tell the young people is talk to your kids, not at your kids. That's very important. And I always tell that, and that's the same thing I practice. What my father told me and my mother, I practice, and that's exactly what I do today.